Join me as I take on the challenge of catching the slyest financial fraudsters out there and exposing their tricks. Financial fraud is a serious problem that affects individuals and businesses alike, causing financial losses and damaging reputations. It's a growing concern that requires our attention and action, and that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. When it comes to financial fraud, one of the biggest challenges we face is the sophistication of the fraudsters themselves. They're getting smarter, more creative, and more convincing, making it increasingly difficult for us to identify and avoid their scams. They use psychological manipulation, clever marketing, and advanced technology to stay one step ahead of us, and it's no wonder that so many people fall victim to their tactics. The reality is that anyone can be a target, regardless of age, income, or education level. Fraudsters prey on our vulnerabilities, our fears, and our desires, and they're always looking for new ways to exploit them. That's why it's essential that we stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay ahead of the game. The good news is that by being more aware of their tactics, we can reduce our chances of becoming a victim. We can learn to recognize the red flags, to spot the inconsistencies, and to ask the right questions. We can take control of our financial security and protect ourselves from the devastating consequences of financial fraud. There are countless examples of financial fraud cases that have made headlines over the years, from Bernie Madoff to Ponzi schemes, from phishing scams to identity theft. These cases are a stark reminder of the importance of being proactive and taking responsibility for our financial well-being. They show us that financial fraud can happen to anyone, at any time, and that it's our job to stay informed and stay protected. Take the case of Charles Ponzi, for instance, who promised investors returns of up to 50% on their investments. He claimed to be investing in international reply coupons, but in reality, he was using money from new investors to pay off earlier investors, while keeping a significant portion for himself. His scheme defrauded thousands of people out of millions of dollars, and it's a classic example of a pyramid scheme. Or consider the case of R. Alan Stanford, who ran a Ponzi scheme that defrauded investors of over $7 billion. He promised them high returns on certificates of deposit, but in reality, he was using the money to fund his own businesses and personal expenses. His scheme lasted for over 2 decades, and it's a testament to the cunning and deceit of financial fraudsters. Alan Stanford lived like a king. He used fraudulent schemes to sell counterfeit certificates of deposit through Stanford International Bank, but his bank was a sham. The damages amounted to about $7 billion. In court, Stanford tried to deny everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. Judge David Hittner called him an insatiable predator. Prosecutor Paul Pelletier demanded ultimate justice. In 2012, at his sentencing, Stanford was given 110 years in prison. The reaction of the victims was very violent, and many victims lost their retirement savings. The king of Wall Street, Bernard Madoff, created the illusion of success for years in a luxurious office in Manhattan. His clients, Hollywood stars, politicians, bankers, believed in his genius. But behind the scenes, he was building a pyramid scheme that collapsed in 2008. Madoff created the largest pyramid scheme in history. Using a Ponzi scheme, paying off old clients at the expense of new ones, Madoff promised investors consistently high returns. The amount of damage at face value of assets amounted to about $64.8 billion. In total, about $14.5 billion from the compensation fund was withdrawn and returned. After the arrest, Madoff looked depressed, but tried to save face. At his trial, he pleaded guilty but without remorse. Judge Dennis Chin was adamant, calling his crimes unprecedented. and prosecutor Levitt demanded the maximum penalty for Madoff. In 2009, Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison. What shocked the court most was the reaction of the victims, as many had lost everything. In court, some cried, others screamed with rage and hurled unthinkable curses at the defendant's head. Another example is the case of Elizabeth Holmes, who founded Theranos, a healthcare technology company that claimed to have revolutionized blood testing. She promised investors that her company's technology could perform hundreds of tests with just a few drops of blood. But in reality, the technology was flawed and inaccurate. She raised millions of dollars from investors, including prominent figures like Betsy DeVos and Rupert Murdoch, and she even partnered with major companies like Walgreens and Safeway. Her scheme was eventually exposed, and she was charged with fraud, but not before she had caused significant financial harm to her investors. Elizabeth Ann Holmes was born on February 3, 1984 in Washington, D.C. She studied chemical engineering at Stanford University, but dropped out in 2003 to found Theranos. Holmes claimed that her company had developed a method of analyzing blood that required just one drop from a finger instead of the traditional vein draw. The project attracted billions of dollars in investment, and Holmes herself became one of the most famous female entrepreneurs in the world. Theranos's founder promised to revolutionize medical diagnostics, but her technology didn't work. She misled investors and partners. In 2015, journalist John Carrero of the Wall Street Journal launched an investigation that showed Theranos's technology didn't work. In 2018, Holmes was charged with fraud along with company president Ramesh Sunny Balwani. The amount of damages totaled about $1 billion. Holmes agreed to turn over some of her assets, but most of the funds were lost. In court, Holmes tried to play the role of victim, but her coldness gave away. Judge Edward Davila was strict. Prosecutor Robert Litch called her a master manipulator. The reaction of the aggrieved parties was unequivocal. Investors, famous and respected people felt betrayed. In 2022, she was found guilty of 4 counts of fraud. In November 2022, Holmes was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in prison. Elizabeth Holmes is considered one of the largest examples of corporate fraud in modern history. One of the most shocking cases of financial fraud is the case of Jérôme Kerviel, a French trader who worked for Société Générale. He lost the bank $7.2 billion through a series of unauthorized trades, and he did it all from the comfort of his own home. He used his knowledge of the bank's systems to conceal his trades and avoid detection, and he even used fake emails and documents to cover his tracks. It's a staggering example of the lengths to which fraudsters will go to commit fraud, and it's a reminder that financial fraud can happen anywhere, at any time. The case of Jérôme Kerviel is particularly shocking because of the scale of the fraud and the sophistication of his methods. He was able to exploit the bank's systems and evade detection for years, and it's a testament to the cunning and deceit of financial fraudsters. It's also a reminder that financial fraud can happen to anyone, regardless of their size or reputation, and that it's essential to stay vigilant and proactive in protecting ourselves. Pay attention to several more high-profile exposures of fraudulent schemes and their creators, trusting which naive and gullible people lost hundreds of millions of dollars. Wolf of Wall Street. Jordan Belfort, as a fraudulent scheme carried out pump and dump stocks through the brokerage firm Stratton Oakmont. His life was defiantly flamboyant in plain sight. It was endless partying, drugs and deceit. The amount of damages from his criminal actions amounted to about $200 million. Belfort paid $110 million in compensation. In court, Belfort fully admitted guilt, repented, but continued to party and joke. In 2003, At the trial, with the participation of Judge John Gleeson and prosecutor Joel Cohen-Belfort, was sentenced to 22 months in prison. Mirror Trading International, Johannesburg, South Africa. Mirror Trading International, cryptocurrency platform, promised high profits from forex trading using bitcoins. In 2020, the cryptocurrency platform went bankrupt, and it turned out to be a pyramid scheme. The amount of damage is estimated at $589 million, and more than 23,000 investors worldwide were affected. MTI founder Johann Steinberg was arrested in Brazil in 2021 and extradited to South Africa. He is charged with fraud, money laundering, and violating financial services laws. Thousands of people feel cheated and are demanding a fair verdict. Fugitive. Carlos Ghosn, Japan, Tokyo, who escaped from custody in a suitcase, engaged in concealing income and illegally using Nissan's assets. In total, he embezzled about $5 million in this way. Due to the escape of the criminal, the trial with Judge Takeshi Oka and prosecutor Hiroshi Morimoto has been postponed from 2018. According to the defense, Ghosn is confident of his innocence. The legitimate question then becomes, why did he flee, and in a highly original way? This list of crimes committed, their organizers, could go on for a long time. So long as there are naive and gullible people in the world who, sincerely deluded, fall into the cleverly arranged networks of fraudsters. Financial fraud is committed in many countries and parts of the world. Abusing people's trust, fraudsters draw them into their networks, skillfully invent various criminal schemes, and embezzle the property and money of their clients. The key to recognizing and protecting ourselves from financial fraud is to stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay ahead of the game. We need to be aware of the tactics that fraudsters use, and we need to take control of our financial security. We need to ask questions, do our research, and verify the authenticity of any investment or opportunity that comes our way. We need to be proactive, not reactive, and we need to take responsibility for our financial well-being. In conclusion, financial fraud is a serious problem that requires our attention and action. By staying informed, staying vigilant, and staying ahead of the game, we can reduce our chances of becoming a victim and protect ourselves from the devastating consequences of financial fraud. Financial fraudsters often use complex schemes, but they can be avoided by exercising caution and verifying information. Regular audits, using licensed platforms, and being skeptical of guaranteed returns will help protect your assets. If you've had any experiences with financial fraud, we'd love to hear about them in the comments below. And if you're looking for more tips on financial literacy, be sure to check out our other video on the topic.